Here we go. You can start recording. The Blake Sloan Real Estate Show. He's been featured in Forbes magazine, Wall Street Journal, Realtor magazine, and many other national publications. He's been on Fox News, ABC, and NBC. He's endorsed by Barbara Corcoran, Sean Hannity, and Glenn Beck. It's a truly amazing story. Industry leaders have dubbed him the real estate whiz kid. Here's Blake Sloan and the Blake Sloan Real Estate Show.
It's not.
Welcome to
It's not on. Can you hear though?
Yes. All right, go again.
Okay, so
All right, just redo it. It sounds on now. All right, I can hear you now.
we got problems with the hearing.
We had to restart because it's not picking me up.
Pause. Rewind. Stop. Redo. Start recording.
There we go. I got it.
It's the Blake Sloan Real Estate Show. He's been featured in Forbes magazine, Wall Street Journal, Realtor magazine, and many other national publications. He's been on Fox News, ABC, and NBC. He's endorsed by Barbara Corcoran, Sean Hannity, and Glenn Beck. It's a truly amazing story. Industry leaders have dubbed him the real estate whiz kid. Here's Blake Sloan and the Blake Sloan Real Estate Show.
Welcome to the Blake Sloan Real Estate Show. Got a brand new show for you this week. Tons of great information this week. And first thing we'll get into is the market numbers. Brand new market numbers in. Very, very interesting to say the least. And some down actually in terms of new sales down almost 10%. We'll talk about what's going on there, why that's the case, and dig into what's happening. I do foresee that bouncing back a little bit next month. We'll talk about also some big news this week in terms of landlords and renters. Some big Supreme Court news in actually regards to the eviction moratorium. So we'll talk about what that means, what's happening with that, and what to expect. I do know of a lot of landlords who are very frustrated, having some issues, and even people that bought houses that could not move in because the person who owned it previously actually stayed there for a few days and then would not leave. So we'll talk about what's happening with that, some crazy stuff we're seeing. Also, we've seen an increase in inventory. Actually, homes for sale has been climbing a little bit. We'll talk about what's happening with that, what that means for buyers, also what that means for sellers. And also one thing we're seeing, we'll dig into this week, is we're seeing a big issue with appraisals, even more so than usual, where they're coming in short. And it's actually costing a lot of homeowners tens of thousands of dollars on the back end. They either have to reduce the price or the property does not go through. And then that throws a big wrench in if they're trying to buy something else. And so we developed a system to help our sellers fight back and keep their hard-earned equity, which is great news. There, and there's one thing too, we'll talk about some amazing success stories. Our team's been absolutely crushing. I think about 25, 26 properties under contract in the last week, and also a couple horror stories, some crazy stuff we're seeing. Just had actually a message on Facebook right before I started the show here, where someone was using their friend and was reaching out to me for advice because their friend was screwing it up and telling them something that was not even true. So we'll talk about that and some great information here on today's show, and we'll just kind of dig in about that.
Separate your friends and your business.
Oh man, it's crazy. This story is a good one too.
Hey, Blake, for any new listeners, or just to give you all an update on just who this guy Blake Sloan is, it's an amazing story. Industry leaders have dubbed him the real estate whiz kid. He's been featured in Forbes magazine, Wall Street Journal, NBC, Realtor magazine, and many other national publications. He's been personally endorsed by Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, Barbara Corcoran. One of those by itself is quite the accomplishment, but all of them together, it's unprecedented. Last week, we learned a little bit more about you, Blake, and your team, and how a good portion of your success has come from the trademark system that you've developed to help both buyers and sellers here in our market. Can you recap quickly for anyone new to the show, just exactly, and a quick overview about how they work?
Yes, and again, this is the why behind the show, and really kind of why we do what we do. Just put the work in to prep for the show and bring content. And we mentioned before, we have one main goal of the show, and that's just to provide value. But I'll tell you, the biggest problem I see is everyone makes this huge mistake. It doesn't matter how affluent they are, how many properties they've sold, how many properties they own. They still seem to make the same exact mistake. And the same person that messaged me earlier did the same thing. And they make the mistake of thinking that all real estate agents are the same, and it could not be further from the truth, right? Just like any doctor, any lawyer, right? If you're charged with a crime you did not commit, I'm not going to, pick my friend who's part-time attorney who's tried a few cases, right? But the reality is people do that all the time when they're dealing with their largest asset, right? If I have something I need in the legal field, I want the most aggressive one who has the most experience and who understands what I do. And people don't realize when I'm selling a property, the single most important variable that determines your failure or success as a home seller comes down to one thing only. And that thing is the agent you choose, not the wall color, not the grass quality. It comes down to the agent you choose and specifically how they actually execute. And all when you're selling a property, there's 118 different variables. If each one handled correctly, it puts money in your pocket. If any of those are mishandled or the ball gets dropped at any point, that costs you hard-earned equity, the property does not get sold. And so that's what we see happen many times is you have one agent who's trying to juggle all these balls. It's simply not possible to do all of those on one property, much less multiple listings at the same time. So what you find happen is most agents, they do the 3 Ps. 1, they promise the world to get the listing. 2, they put it to MLS. And 3, they just pray that someone else brings a buyer. Meanwhile, they're down the street trying to get the next listing just so they can survive. And I know that because I've been in the business for a very long time, since 2005, and grew up in the business. Mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandpa, grandma sold real estate. And really, it's been the same thing since I was a kid. They're still operating the same way today, most agents across the country. And so you owe it to yourself to make sure you can understand how the process works and how you can have those variables executed for you. And so what we did is, first of all, identified all those variables. That's how we know, hey, look, there's 118, and how do I make sure that I can handle those for the client and make sure I can give them a huge competitive advantage? So we create a system. That system's called the Guaranteed Sold System. The only proven system to sell homes twice as fast and for up to 20% more money than traditional methods, and it works very, very, very well. On the flip side, there's 100+ variables for buyers out there, and that's one of the horror stories I was talking about earlier, where if each one's handled correctly gives you an advantage, you find the right property and you get it at the right price. But if not, it's going to cost you a lot more money, or the scenario earlier, they missed out on like 8 different properties. And so the system we have for buyers called the Unfair Advantage Home Buying System gets priority access to foreclosures, distress sales, desperate sellers, the absolute best negotiation and purchase price, as well as through the home inspection. And so you need something like that to help give you a huge advantage because, like I mentioned, anyone can buy or sell something, but that does not mean that you're going to get the best deal, or if you're a seller, get the most amount of money. That's something I've been kind of talking about the past few weeks. I think is very important because I'm seeing it happen every day, is that the reality is you don't need a real estate agent right now. In today's market, anybody can sell a house and you can sell it yourself, but that does not mean that you're going to actually get the most amount of money. And so the best example I've been able to find lately is really has to do with cars, right? Let's say you had a classic Corvette and it's in pristine condition, amazing Corvette. You can take that same Corvette and you can probably put it in Walmart parking lot today and sell that within the hour, maybe by the end of the day, and get a good price on it. But that does not mean that Corvette sold for the most amount of money possible. And so what if you took that same Corvette and you took it and put it in every Corvette enthusiast website, every Corvette enthusiast magazine, also every Corvette enthusiast group online, and you got much more exposure, aka more eyeballs? What you could do there is find a buyer who's willing to pay a premium. When they do that, guess what? They come and they see the value in what you offer, and they have the resources to do so. And so that same Corvette now sells for more money because it has more exposure. And that's the same thing we do with our Guaranteed Sold System, is get you international exposure that gets more eyeballs on the property and finds buyers who pay a premium. The problem is most agents take your property and they put it to the Walmart parking lot. The Walmart parking lot is simply the MLS. They take photos. Most of them use their cell phone. They take it, pop it in the MLS, and just hope someone else brings a buyer to them. They get half the commission, and they're totally fine with that. Here, we're not fine with that. We know we're hired by the seller to actually get the job done, bring the buyer to the table, and that's exactly what our Guaranteed Sold System does. So you owe it to yourself to get much more than just being in the Walmart parking lot. Make sure you can have someone who can get that, I guess, exposure, get the right eyeballs on it, and make sure that you can find buyers that will pay premiums. In our case, a lot of times we'll find people get multiple buyers on the same property, and it drives that price up. We have a system we designed. We launch it on a certain day of the week. We have 2 open houses, and then we have basically multiple offers come in over the weekend, and then we can get the seller to pick the best one for them, usually over asking price, and they settle with that for the most amount of money. So don't be someone who takes your largest asset. You go with somebody who's part-time or whatever it may be, and allow them to just put it out there, because if you take the first offer or you price it low or anything like that, you're going to cost yourself your hard-earned equity. And so when it comes down to that, you owe it to yourself to make sure that you at least reach out and find an expert who's the absolute best, who can get the right exposure, and make sure you bring all the eyeballs to your property that you need.
Absolutely. And separate yourself, like I said, from your friends. When you give your friends 20 grand to represent you in a real estate deal?
Oh, I know, and I get some crazy stories where it costs a lot more than 20 grand too. We'll talk about it after this next break.
As a real estate investor, I look for sharp agents who really know their market. Agents who do so much business that they can find you the right investor property and sell it for the most money without drama. When I need real estate advice in Myrtle Beach, I call Blake Sloan. He's an agent that can attract hundreds of buyers every month. There's more demand for your home, sell it faster for more money. He guarantees to sell it on your timeline for a he'll buy it. Call the agent I trust, Blake Sloan, and avoid the drama.
Oh,
All right, so we're looking at 10 minutes, the second one too?
yeah,
I was trying to, I got done a little too early on that last one, so I was trying to
that's good, man.
I was trying to stretch it out there.
Good job. We're at, well, we're cool.
All right.
I just do a little math and we'll work it out. 929. All right, and so this guy, come back with this guy. Like 2. I'm ready when you are, bud.
All right, I'm good to go. Are we good? Yeah. Welcome back to Blake Sloan Real Estate Show. We got the brand new market numbers in, and interesting to say the least. We talked a little bit last week about the micro market numbers, and today we'll talk about the macro numbers because that's like, hey, look, what's happening across the Grand Strand? This is the question I get the most, and this is really what means the most. And my goal to provide the most value I can is like, hey, what's my largest asset worth? What's happening or price? And it gives you something, one, to talk about, and also really just be able to know what's happening. Because I tell you, we find a lot of sellers right now that are reaching out. We're able to get them a whole lot more money than they thought they could. And so that's great news right now. If you look at last month, though, we had a little bit of a bad news, so to speak, in terms of closed sales. Remember, there's two ways to look at this. We have numbers in the rear view mirror, which is what the overall closed sales are. And we also have numbers in the front windshield, which is like new pending numbers. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But looking for the rear view mirror, which is, hey, what closed last month? If you look at closings last month, we were down 8.8% from the same month last year, which is interesting, almost a 10% decline. If you listen back to some of the earlier shows, you know that we predicted that because we could tell that the new pending deals were just going down. And right now, so if you look at last month, there were 651 single family home sales versus if you look back in June, there were 797. So over 100, plus properties different. That's pretty significant when you're talking about a summer month. And I think one of the things that we noticed, and I kind of talked about this with my company, is that this year, we're always usually a pretty seasonal market, but this year we saw first and second quarter extremely high compared to the usual. And I think a lot had to do with some of the pain that people were experiencing in the Northeast. They were angry. There were still lockdowns. And so I think you're going to see it a little more spread out at first and second quarter, and third and fourth quarter this year may be a little bit less than usual. But the good news is price is still holding up very, very good. Last month, price for median price was up 23%, a new record on the Grand Strand, which is awesome. Last month, the median price was $324,750, which is huge. If you look back, only back to January of 2018, it was back at $190. And so if you had, a $200,000 house 1 year ago, we got 20+% increase. That's $40,000 in your pocket in terms of equity just in 12 months. And so we're seeing a lot of people take that, cash out, invest in something else. And that's really a great extra income for some people when you do the math on that, right? 40 grand, 12 months. It's not too bad in terms of extra money that you're using. And a lot of people realize one of the best ways to hedge against inflation, which we're seeing right now everywhere, is in fixed assets like real estate. And that's one of the best places to put your money, both in personal properties, also investment properties. And so that's something that's very, very cool there as well. Into average sale price looking great too, up 17% last month alone at $396,872. We're scraping that 400,000 mark, which is great. We hit that in June. That was the new peak, $400,159. It dropped slightly, which is typical, into July. at 396,872. So that's great news there overall. One thing that's driving that, and also what's really protecting price, is inventory. We're still at a really super low inventory. We did creep up a little bit from where we were. Right now we're at 1.3 months inventory, which is down 62.9% from the same time last year. The all-time low, we were at 0.9 months inventory right around May, and it's bumped back up to 1.3 months. And what that means is it's a hypothetical equation of, hey, look, let's say there wasn't a new property listed at all. How long would it take before everything sold out at the current run rate? Right now, that's 1.3 months before it'd be gone, which is what we call a super seller's market, which means if you're a seller, you have a huge advantage because there's way more buyers right now than there is sellers who are selling their home. Typically, a healthy market's about 6 months. Anything above 6 months is a buyer's market. Anything below 6 months is a seller's market. We've been in a seller's market for a long time now. Really, the last time we were in a buyer's market was all the way back at, I'll tell you right now, was in 2018, early 2018, and it's been a seller's market ever since. So if you're thinking about selling, you want to take advantage of that, especially from the single family side. One thing that was interesting, though, I was talking about with my team earlier, if you look at buyer traffic, it's up 44% from where it was last year. What this means is showings per listing. If you look at the numbers, though, it's interesting. I'll track it month versus month. So the peak this year was in April. We had 8.2 showings per listing across the entire Grand Strand, but it crept down in May to 7.8, June was 7.4, and July 7.2. So it's declined really for the past 3 months in a row. We'll watch and see what happens there, and that's what also helps me think about, first and second quarter is really a front-loaded type thing versus what we're seeing in our usual year. So condo sales also been doing pretty well the past 3 months. It was pretty much inventory is pretty much flat, but I'll go into closed sales. They saw a pretty significant drop last month in condos as well. It's still up 5.7% from the same month last year, but there was 664 condo sales last month. If you go back to June, though, 842. So significant drop there. A lot has to do with inventory. And so what we saw happen is as housing inventory dropped, everyone tended to move to condos because of affordability. So all the houses in the $100,000, $200,000 price range were gone. They moved to condos. A lot of those end up being gone too now, which obviously drove up price. Look at price for median price for condos up 14.8%, which is great news at 166,500. Average sale price up 17.8% at 201,434, which is awesome. If you look at back in February 2018, it was 139. So a lot of extra equity, a lot of extra money there for people. That's great news overall. Also, if you look at what's happening right now in terms of inventory, there's actually 550 single-family home sales. And Glenn, you'll probably remember this. If you remember, like what a month ago was like 380. So we're seeing a lot more houses in the market. Some of that has to do with people just being ready to sell. Also, a little bit of less buyers out there is not eating up the inventory quite as much, and that shows me it's softening a little bit. And we'll kind of talk about that here in a few. But the good news is we're averaging, each and every week about 640 properties. The last 7 days, 643 properties, right at $200 million went under contract last 7 days, which has me thinking we'll probably see a bump in terms of numbers once the August numbers come out on next week's show. And so very excited about that. One thing that's driving that is interest rates, right? Interest rates have been very low. Right now we're at 2.98%, which is awesome. 15-year fixed, 2.41. 30-year, 2.75, and a jumbo loan right now, 3.13%. A 5-year adjust rate mortgage is 2.81%. So great news overall in terms of that. What do you remember the past few weeks has kind of changed a little bit, right? So that's just something that we're seeing. Overall, that's kind of the one part. I guess we'll take a quick break, come back in a second. Or
Do you want to talk about the hot buyers we've got?
yeah, we can kind of get into that really quick if you want to.
Well, right now, Blake and the team are working with a ridiculous amount of home buyers who are looking for the Myrtle Beach area. They're looking here to move here, and they're looking for homes from $150,000 to $3.5 million. So if you're thinking of selling, you can contact Blake at 843-808-SOLD. That's 843-808-SOLD. Blake showed me his current count of buyers who are signed up and actively searching for homes on his website, and they're there every day. Today's number, an incredible 62,947.
Yes, and that's one thing that's blows everyone's mind. Those aren't like hits either. There's a username, password account from all over the globe. Really, right now, I got Dan Matheson from Brooklyn, New York, Been on the site 55 times. He's got 12 favorites right now. That's all over, right? Angel from Washington, D.C. I got Lee from Mabane, North Carolina. I got Dexter from Charlotte, North Carolina. We got Newland, North Carolina. Sportsylvania, Virginia. Never heard of that one. I got Oyster Bay, New York. Fitchburg, Massachusetts, Chicago, Illinois. And so the reality is we have buyers from across the globe. We spend massive amounts of money. And people ask the question, hey, look, why should I call you versus anyone else? And the reality is we have more buyers, right? 62,947. And we outspend the average agent 100 to 1 from a marketing standpoint. We'll talk about that in a minute, but our advantage is our business model. And so most agents are single agents that try to juggle all the balls, right? They're at McDonald's trying to do the front register, the drive doing the french fries at the same time, and it's not very efficient. With our team, we have a team of specialists. Right now we have 20 buyers experts. They work with buyers all day long, every day, 2 listing partners, 2 inside salespeople who are basically make sure to answer all the phones. And we have a full administrative team so that we have a team of specialists, not some generalist who's trying to do everything else at the same time. And so that's what gives us the advantage, because if I was a single agent spending tens and tens of thousands of dollars every month driving traffic and had 60,000 buyers, I'd be out of business. There's just not enough time in the day to follow up and work with them. But you as a home seller have a huge advantage because we take those buyers. The first thing we do is match them up to your house. We have a software that does that. It'll literally score the buyers based on your property and the data and help us find the most best match that we can call out, reach out to. So we'll talk more about that in a second. Also, we'll talk about some awesome success stories coming after this next break. Is there a way to turn that air down? Can you turn that air down in here?
Hey, Myrtle Beach, it's Gary LaVox. What'd you say?
The air is like really hot.
Okay.
Gary LaVox, ACM Solid here. Construction corporate folks who understand the challenges that come with life station for many that have.
Yeah, somebody's battling the thermostat with it.
Man, it's hot in here.
Yeah, you
Turn it
should
up
see.
to 69 and
You
67.
should see this house that just popped up on my thing.
An agent who's willing
Dude,
to
and it says fully furnished, and it's all these people's like orders. I'm like, so you're pretty much offering to sell somebody to clean up somebody else's crap. Like, I mean, it's
If you're moving on, trust Blake to provide your family a stress-free home sale experience. Find Blake Sloan online at blakesloan.com, or you can call him at 843-808-SOLD. Stop hacking.
Yeah.
like
You find
That
style
one.
matches
broken tractors. Like,
Yeah.
why was it 249? The house wasn't even worth 249.
Like 3.
Okay.
3. All right.
So we got 2 more segments.
Yes, sir. And this will be 11 minutes.
11. Let me change that timer here.
29 and 36. That's, and 20. Okay. Ready, Freddie?
1 second. Let me find the next.
I'm so glad you went to Grandpa's 89th birthday.
All right. Welcome back to Blake Sloan Real Estate Show. We just talked about our hot buyers, and the one thing just want to mention, we need sellers, right? We were just looking out, if you know anyone looking to buy, sell, if you like them, don't like them, friend, relative, whatever it is, have them call us. Save my number in your phone, 843-808-SOLD. They mention the word real estate. So look, you got to call my buddy Blake. He has the buyers. They're going to mention 62,947 from all over, and it allows us to make sure we can get the job done and get you the most amount of money in your pocket. And that's one of the biggest concerns right now And I can't say how many times a week, literally every single day of the week, I see a horror story, because you got to remember, we have 20 buyers experts on our team, which means they're doing buyer deals. And a lot of times there's just agents out there. The average agent on marketplace sells roughly 4 homes a year. And so they get a listing, they put it in there. They don't really have a whole lot of feeling of how fast the market is. They take the first offer, or they underprice it. We send the offer immediately, and guess what? They accept it. Meanwhile, we have buyers who have paid $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 above that. And also sometimes you see the appraisal come in $30,000 above that. And so you owe it to yourself, your friends and relatives owe it to them to get the absolute most amount of money. So awesome success story. Very, very proud of. Right now, we got a really cool story. Steve and Phyllis purchased home Myrtle Beach a few years ago. They recently made a decision to purchase a different home in a different area, but they need to sell their current property for top dollar. Thankfully, Steve's been listening to the radio show for a while, knew exactly what to call. We came in, designed a custom plan, launched our global marketing blitz, professional photos, the virtual reality walkthrough. And within just a few days, we have massive traffic, had Steve and Phyllis 3 offers on their home. They accepted a cash offer of $5,100 above asking price, and we even priced that property high. So that's an example of, if you do it right, we create this thing we call the virtual auction effect. And we go through that process. If you can get people to bid against each other, that's how you're able to get the most amount of money for the home. There is an art to that, right? And so very, very important to think about in terms of that as well. Also, John and Gloria recently purchased a condo in Myrtle Beach, retired. Unfortunately, some things changed. They had to go back to Arizona to be closer to family. And so the biggest concern for them is, can they get their money back? That's one thing to watch out for, where if you buy, let's say you buy now, you have closing costs, all these things. Sometimes it's hard to get back out of that, considering what you owe on it, all the other closing costs for the second transaction. And so long story short, they were referred to us by an amazing radio listener. We came in, let them know, hey, look, we can absolutely get that and a little bit more money for you, which is very, very cool. The thing is, they had already found a house in Arizona. They'd actually already made an offer on the house in Arizona. And so they had a deadline to hit, or they would lose the house and lose the deposit. All this before we actually got to talk to them. So it was interesting enough. We came in and said, absolutely. So they wanted a cash buyer instead of a finance buyer, because the chance of the finance buyers, it could have fallen through, right? So we did that. We launched our global marketing blitz, professional photos, right? They were referred to us by an awesome listener. Within 48 hours, we had John and Gloria full price cash offer on their home, nothing to worry about at all, missing out on their new home in Arizona, and they got out from under the one they were in. And so this is just one of the many examples we see over and over and over again. And so that's just something that's very important to look at overall. One of the things we're seeing is just horror stories right now. Most of that's either agents who just really don't know what's going on. And here's the thing, like, they're just doing their thing in their world, 4 or 5 houses, a year they're selling. They don't feel the pace and the intensity of what's happening. And so you want to make sure that you have someone that's at least in the know in terms of what's going on. But right before the show, I had someone who, I guess you say, is kind of like an acquaintance that we know. And she sent this message, and she'd actually bought something with more agents years ago. But here's what she sent to us. She said, hey, do you know, and I'm reading this just obviously off my message, and I'll kind of summarize it, but it says, do you know if I would need to have a contract on my current house before I can make an offer on another one? Here's the problem. I have a friend help me look for a house, but she keeps claiming I would need to have a contract on mine first before I can make an offer on anything. Every time I look at something, it goes pending. And so I don't know if I have to have mine up for sale yet. Is there any way for me to do a contingency offer and have earnest money down so I don't lose the house? She's telling me that I cannot do this. So I'm thinking, like,
What the heck?
yeah.
What kind of friend is that?
So it's funny. So I said, and obviously I'm not going to give her too much because she didn't come to us first. So I'm not going to do the job for her agent, who obviously doesn't know what they're doing. So I said, we do that all the time. And we get the house under contract. There are multiple ways to write it up. That's all I wrote. And plus, I was about to come to my show. And she says, so I can make an offer before my house is under contract, ? She says I cannot, and the seller will not wait for me to get mine under contract. I said, we do it all the time. And we actually literally did that today with a seller, a friend of mine named Scott, who we're listing his house. She looked at one today here in Arrowhead, made an offer on it contingent upon his. His doesn't go active till next week. And so we do this all the time. But here's the thing. Her friends give her this advice, which is not even true.
That was a friend, the listing agent?
No, her friend's a buyer's agent helping her in that scenario. But her friend's trying to list her house too, I assume.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And can you imagine, she's obviously got a price wrong if she's getting her.
Well, her house isn't even listed yet. So she's trying to lock her in for the listing before she'll make the offer. Right? I mean, I see this all the time. So here's what she wrote. And I said, this is going to make a great, quote, friend real estate story for my radio show. And she put, haha, please don't use my name. So I'm not going to use your name. But the reality is, here's what happens. I see this happen over and over. Just because your friend, just got their license and works still part-time at Applebee's does not mean that you should use them when you're buying or selling your largest asset. And here's the thing. If they're good and they're experienced, no problem. But I see this happen so much. And we're not buying Best Buy TVs here. We're buying like literally 30-year mortgages that you're dealing with. And in this case, she's missed out on 8 different properties she talks about. So the point being, like, here's the thing. I have a lot of great attorneys I know that are my age, I went to school with, very, very smart, that are nice people, that are friends. But that does not mean I'm going to use them for a legal reason, right? You know why? Because I care about results when it comes to legal stuff, when it comes to medical stuff, when it comes to my real estate, my largest asset. I care about results, and I make sure I want to work with the absolute best in that scenario, right? And so same thing with the medical side, right? My family has a big history of melanoma. My dad, my uncle passed away for that. There's a couple young dermatologist doctors I know that I actually grew up with, but guess what? I don't go to them. I go to the absolute best, who's been doing it for 40 plus years, right? Who's very, very good, because guess what? This is life or death for me in that scenario. I want the absolute best. And so I don't understand why anybody would demand anything less when you're dealing with your largest asset. It's cool to go to dinner with somebody, but not have them, in this case, what she's telling her is not even close to being true. So just keep that in mind. That's something we're seeing all the time right now, which is just something that,
Separate your business and your friends.
Well, the one thing you have, and all this, I've seen this happen too. They tell them their credit score to everybody. Especially if you don't get something, if you don't get something approved or something comes up on the credit. We've had this. Well, hey, this person had this on their credit from 7 years ago. They had to do this to appease the lender, aka the underwriter. All of a sudden, the friends got that. They're sharing that to everybody in town. I mean, it's one of those things you got to be very, very careful, especially considering Myrtle Beach is kind of a small town in itself. But I see so many of those horror stories, or they don't do the job, they don't deliver, and then it screws up that friendship. And so you see this happen over and over. But here's the thing: just make sure that you demand one thing, results, and that's all that matters. You make decisions based on that. It does, make a big difference. But it goes back to that same thing. They just make that mistake of thinking that all agents are the same, and it could not be further from the truth, just because there's so many nuances and so many situations and so many things like this one. Do you buy first or you sell first? Or can you do both?
And in the hottest market in our lifetime,
Yeah.
why would you risk it?
And I mean, in that scenario, she's not even let her write offer up, but she could write offer up. And we do it all the time. And it's just one of those things that it's just unfortunate because that person doesn't know what they can do, right? And so that's something that's very, very important too. One thing we're seeing now too, that we'll talk about is appraisal issues. And so that's something that's a big deal right now, because what's happening is you sell your house, a buyer comes in, they super, motivated, maybe get multiple offers. And let's say you list it and it goes under contract for $300,000. And what happens is the market's moving so fast, the appraiser comes in, they're busy, they're kind of lazy, they're rushing their job. And all of a sudden they do the appraisal at $250,000. And so what you're left with is all of a sudden that buyer can't get the loan because they have to have, an appraisal that justifies that price, and also based on what their loan amount is. And so what you do there is you have two main options, really. The seller can come off the price, aka give up their hard-earned equity, or they can bust the deal. But the problem is most of the time, like in this scenario, let's say it happened to this lady, she would then have potentially lose her house that she's buying. So a lot of times they'll just give up the equity and say, well, you know what, we'll just drop the price. And so we've had appraisals come in the last couple months, $100,000 below asking, below the contract price. And so we've had scenarios where the appraiser hasn't even gone into the house. We know that because we like to meet them over there, and we like to make sure they see everything, because what they're doing, they're just rushing. And there's a lot of data, and there's even floor plans. There's a company appraisers use, because we bought the same software. So you can see the entire floor plan of the house based on what the county data has, what they have. And it's fascinating. Give you all the measurements, but that doesn't count if the house got added onto or something happened since the original. And so what you're seeing sometimes, square footage is wrong. What they're doing, all their data is on wrong. They're not actually putting their eyes on it. They don't see the upgrades they put in there. And so you have to have someone that fights for you in that scenario. And so what we do, and we even have a template built out. We go in and we find out all the errors they have in the appraisal. We list them all. And then we also find comps they could have used. We found one, like the appraiser went like 20 miles out the way. Meanwhile, there's one mile away. And so the reality is, make sure you have them. We've been able to find it. We submit it for a review appraisal. We find the holes and we submit and request a secondary review appraisal. We get that grant, we make sure we meet that lender over there. We show them all the mistakes the first person made. Because here's the thing, the appraiser will never, ever change it because they feel like they're not going to go on their word because it proves they made a mistake, right? So there's a whole model and a process you must have. But again, these are examples, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 of cost themselves. And so if you want to know how it works, reach out, call us, 843-808-SOLD. We're here every single day, all day, fighting hard for our clients' equity, and we have the process to do so. So quick break, we'll be right back with some great info.
Home and you're like, oh, I found my dream home. That means I have to put up my home for sale now. I need to make sure, I'm going to do this right. Well, there's two things that you can make sure happen because